Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Jack Tibbs. It's a pleasure to get to visit with you. This is a practitioner clinical implementation session regarding the gastrointestinal microbiome reseeding program, the Systemic Formulas tandem offerings of the GI Wellness Package and the Pathogen Purge. So we're going to take a look at this. Now, we've already had one session on the microbiome where we've learned about tight junctions and microvilli and how the epithelial cells, the enterocytes, perform, and some of the broad stroke importance and foundational essentiality of this program. Let's just start off by saying the microbiome, the bacteria that inhabit the GI tract, all the different colonies of which there's more than 1,000 species, and many of them cannot be taken supplementally because they're anaerobic. And for instance, the bacteroids being anaerobic, needing to exist without oxygen, are just not available in the marketplace yet as far as supplementation. But this is regarding foundational health, because this is a program that if we as practitioners skip over this, we leave a seed of destruction left in our patients. It will either block complete healing, or the patient can relapse easily because there's another message going forth directly to the brain, directly to the thyroid, directly to the liver, to the immune system, and so forth. And that message is that the bacterial partner is unhappy. If you put two horses together to pull a buggy, they both need to be happy and healthy and get along, and they need to pull in the same direction. Same is true on the relationship between the human being and the bacterial colonies that just majorly outnumber us 10 to 1 as far as cells, and 99 to 1 as far as DNA structures. We are terribly outnumbered by these bacteria, but over the time, a human being has set up a relationship with these bacteria that's considered synergistic. Now, a lot of times they'll call them commensal bacteria, but science just keeps destroying that. They're not commensal, meaning that the bacteria might just be tag along, supporting themselves, not bothering the person, the human being, because all the DNA and the metabolic transcriptional processes from these microorganisms are directly impacting cellular metabolism, the brain, and the nervous system of the human being. So in nature, these bacteria needed a place to reside that was warm and 98.6 degrees, and then the problem was the human immune system. So these bacteria have set up a relationship with the human immune system. Now, when we make the bacteria mad, like throw in an antibiotic and threaten their lives, they strike back. And basically the covenant is this: the bacteria say, you take care of me, I'll take care of you. You mess with me a little bit and your health will suffer. You mess with me a whole lot, I'll take you down. Now that's the in-your-face facts of survival of the fittest, of the microbiome. Problem today, we're not taking care of our microbiome. We're not eating the foods that they want. We're taking antibiotics that allow the pathogens to proliferate at the expense of the good guys, the probiotics. We have chemicals in the air and the water and so forth that come in and impact this system. And so with all of these things going on, this is one of the most important things that we can do for our patients, is to reestablish the integrity of the GI tract, to reestablish a healthy covenant between these bacteria. Our lives depend on them, and our bodies that allow them to live there, and that, in essence, control them to a certain extent. Both the bacteria and the human body have checks and balances on each other. They are a team. In fact, the genomic science folks who worked on the human genome, they want to include this genome from all these bacteria into the human genome. The human genome kind of fell where it wasn't all that interesting after a while. Just not enough chromosomes and of individuality to really capture their attention, and we need to include the bacteria as throwing switches, as giving transcriptional information by which our cells and their life processes actually stem from. So wow, this is like earth-shattering importance. If we keep destroying the microbiome, we are destroying ourselves. And if we support the microbiome, we set the stage for ourselves and our patients, their bodies to be able to heal. Now, these bacteria set something they call a set point of inflammation. So if they're fighting inflammation and they're having to fight our own immune systems more, and they're having to survival of the fittest and protect themselves and adapt to survive, the set point of our immune systems comes up. It gets on a hair trigger. Our immune systems get more and more ready to launch an inflammatory attack. We've mentioned many times in the course of these presentations at Time Magazine, February 2004, the cover proclaimed inflammation, the silent killer. It linked it to cancer and Alzheimer's and diabetes and these heart disease, these huge afflictions of life in the 21st century. Inflammation. The set point of inflammation is under our genomic control and how we respond, or it's really an epigenetic response to our GI tract microbiome. That needs to be thoroughly understood. When you think about doctors giving anti-inflammatory drugs, they're not doing anything except destroying more of the microbiome. Not good. If we're taking anti-inflammatory herbs, but we're not taking care of the microbiome, it's more an act of futility. So for all the trouble we've had with inflammation, inflammatory diseases, we are now in the natural health area armed with information that lets us understand set point of inflammation is established in the GI tract. We take care of the GI tract. Now our anti-inflammatories, whether it's fish oil or curcumin and boswellia, ashwagandha and these type of herbs, diet, the things that we know, enzymes, the proteolytic enzymes, they all start working better. We've got to take care of the microbiome first. So the microbiome is a cause and a contributor to either health or autoimmune diseases, chronic degenerative diseases. So tracing this back, and because they have direct influence over the metabolic processes of the human brain, the human cells throughout the body, this becomes a cellular healing message. So these bacteria directly through the enteric nervous system that interfaces with the vagus nervous system, they directly influence the brain. And we get them upset with us. Zonulin opens up, and some of the pathogens like cholera, it will open up those tight junctions. And at the same time, zonulin will open up the blood-brain barrier. And now the toxins from life and the air and the water, they get into the brain. And so we end up with a toxic brain, and we end up with poor regulatory ability. These bacteria actually influence our neurotransmitters. The psychologists know this. They are the ones that came to rally to the natural health banner. Natural health for 30 years has said leaky gut is a problem. Medicine has denied it. It was a psychologist who noticed the one-to-one correlation between intestinal difficulty, depression, anxiety. And so they started the research and found out, sure enough, leaky gut is real. It's a real diagnosable condition. Gut-brain connection is real. If we don't take care of our guts, our brains will not work right. If our brains don't work right, not only is life less fun, but they don't regulate autonomically the systems of the body. We're back to the GI tract. The thyroid has a direct one-to-one relationship with autoimmune through the microbiome. The liver, you can think of the autointoxication process And if the GI tract is fermenting and having problems, the liver has problems, the heart gets some of the brunt of that, and it goes right back into the GALT system, the intestinal immune system, the lymphoid tissue, and repoisons the GI tract. There's a loop that comes around through the liver. Glucose metabolism. We'll talk about this more in just a minute with some research, but the rate of glucose induction is set by these bacteria. So if a person is suffering from insulin resistance and they're exercising and they quit eating carbs and they stay diabetic and they stay fat, it's the microbiome that's made that set point of weight. And of course, massive influence with the immune system, because it was actually the immune system and the adaptability immune factors of the bacteria that shook hands and said, we want to make a treaty. We're going to run life together. You take care of me, I'll take care of you. We'll both be synergistically beneficial. And so the immune system is in the thick of this. Now, so understand the importance of this program. And a good way to look at this is what 25% of the GI tract bacteria are B. fragilis. It's an anaerobic species. It's not a probiotic in the sense that you can take it in a pill. It's a probiotic, meaning it's intended in the covenant between the body and the bacteria that we be synergistically beneficial. And this is called a Bacteroides. And this Bacteroides, B. fragilis, has been studied a lot. It's been convenient for research to study. Now, what I would like to do is set some of the basic fundamental activity of a living species, whether it's human beings or bacteria, it's the same, all living species, and then I'm going to cite 13 research studies quickly and let you know this is where research has proven why this is so important and what we want to broaden the scope of how we think about our patients. A patient comes in with adrenal fatigue. You should not be thinking, what am I going to do for the adrenals? You need to first be thinking, what am I going to do for the microbiome? You see? And this is the kind of thing that's really repatterning how we do these programs for people. If we don't get the prerequisites done, the patient doesn't heal as well. That's the bane of the 21st century. We got away with a lot of things in a sense, meaning that we didn't have to deal with the microbiome so much. We didn't have to deal quite as much with detoxification. We didn't have to check the metabolic rate of the thyroid in order just to see if the body was even in a position to change its tune and to heal. And so now we're back into the 21st centuries of needing prerequisites and more than one prerequisite, because we're trying to get the body back to ground zero where it can start to rebuild after all the damage of the activity of life in the 21st century. So here we go. These bacteroids, and as well as all probiotic and pathogenic species, they can mutate. They can become pathogenic. So our friends can turn on us. Our friendly bacteria literally can turn on us if they are mutated. What mutates them? High starch diet, or a high protein diet, high protein diet. A low fat diet, a very high fat diet. Anything that's radical will mutate these species. It may mutate them in a good direction. Most likely it's going to mutate them in a detrimental, because we might understand the body fundamentally wants variety, and it wants what basically would be the natural diet, the natural plants free of pesticides and meats free of growth hormones. You know, nature's food straight to our bodies makes our bacteria happy. If they're happy, like in a marriage, if the spouse is happy, then the other partner is happy, see? And so that's the issue. What do we do to make our bacteria happy and not mutate? Because mutation means that they have to get tough. They have to fight to survive. And if they're fighting in a survival mode, they put our bodies into a fighting survival mode. That means inflammation goes up. Now, these are very complex systems that are built in our GI tract, and they adapt quickly. So this adaptation, they can beat the antibiotics much of the time, but the antibiotics have mutated them. They're not the same. Now they're they've been beat up a few times, and they're a little more street savvy, and they're not all about peace and love anymore, and they're willing to give the body some collateral damage. And so they adapt quickly to diet. That's a survival trait. And human beings do too, right? Because we can go on a high-carb diet and a low-carb diet and a high-protein diet and a low-protein diet. We can starve and fast and come back and so forth. So the survivors of life adapt to diet and complex diets. If the diet has to be too narrow, it's a threat to survival. Now, they have complex methods to expel waste toxins. So they're trying to preserve the integrity of their inner environment. Human beings have complex systems to get rid of waste toxins, and if we flood the bacteria and flood ourselves, we're just into toxicity, right? And that's why the systemic detoxification programs, the 60-day detox program, the intracellular detox program, these are so important in our clinical practice because we need the bacteria to be able to detox. We need to detox. But the fact that these guys, the bacteria, can expel toxins so well, it means that our bodies get the brunt of their metabolic waste. And so we don't want to keep making toxic bacteria inside our GI tracts. What makes them toxic? How about mercury dental fillings, where the mercury drops down into the GI tract and some of the bacterial species methylate that mercury and make it the most toxic substance on the face of the earth as far as what's in the human body. Yeah, so what that means is we poison the bacteria, they're going to poison us. They're just saying there's a line drawn, and if you cross over it, there's repercussions. It's just that simple. The bacteria help us maintain our immune systems, but most importantly, we have to recognize they manipulate the human immune system to fight and control competitive species. So you're going to have one group of bacteria. They make a little biofilm, they get real happy, living in their promised land, the temperature's good, the food's good. In fact, the food's delivered on a conveyor belt, and they're just having a grand time down here in the intestines, and they're sharing their DNA and their transcriptional RNA factors, and they're supporting our health, and they also have a competitive streak. And they'll tell our immune system, hey, go kill the neighbors for me. We'd like a little more room. We want to spread out. So we have to realize that we as human beings are being manipulated by single-cell organisms. They create chocolate cravings. They control whether we might have depression or not. So we're highly manipulated by making this covenant. Now, when we go back to the Bacteroides, they are amazingly antibiotic resistant. And this is one of the reasons that modern medicine says, oh, the antibiotics, they're not going to hurt you that much. Yeah, they'll kill off a few friendly species, but you know what? You have a lot of species that are resistant and they'll adapt. Well, the problem is we're making things adapt to a life-threatening event. If you think that if you meet a person, and this is what you would just call it Gulf War syndrome, right? We had human beings that were put in some very dire, life-threatening circumstances, and it changed how they perceive society. It changed how they can cope in society. It changed their level of happiness. It changed their ability to go aggressive. And so the same thing is true in the microcosm, that these are antibiotic-resistant species, but once we mutate them time and again, and we don't do the probiotics and try to bring the intestinal culture back to a happy homeostasis, our bodies then, for the rest of our lives, can function with Gulf War syndrome species telling our brains and our thyroids and our bodies what to do. And we don't have a tendency to elect people like that to govern us as a species, but we do seem to elect people like that, the bacteria, to govern our health. Now, these bacteria control our genetic expression via their metabolized or metabolizing proteins. So they're reducing food and their genetics are working, and they give these processed, let's say, little peptide chains and things to the body, and the body goes, great, I know what to do with that. I can use that intracellularly. I want you to realize these bacteria, they may be in the gut, They're pulling the strings in the thyroid cells, in the liver cells, down in your big toe cells. They're pulling strings on all of those metabolic processes. This is huge power that these little tiny critters in our GI tracts exert over our lives and our health. And of course, they're very highly adaptable. They can become resistant to oxidative free radicals. They'll adapt their outer membranes. Well, the immune system uses free radicals to try to kill bacteria. These guys know and have permission to beat the human immune system so that there's an equilibrium. We're not killing them, they're not killing us. We do not want to upset that. These bacteria are our nourishment. They process the carbohydrates for our energy. They convert carbs to fatty acids that are absorbed in the colon. And these fatty acids serve as a ready source of concentrated energy. This is one of the reasons the human being can marathon run, go 4 days without eating, can jog 1,000 miles like the 1,000-mile man, Stu Middleman or somebody. You see? And so they're providing us our food and vitamins. We've often heard vitamin K and some of the B vitamins. They're manufactured and they're given to us because if we don't have vitamin K, we would bleed out. And if you don't eat vitamin K for a few days, you may not have enough reserve. But, oh, wait a minute, the bacteria are making it. So our bodies, if we get a little wound, maintain life. You see how important the relationship is? Now, these bacteria will convert sugars from complex to simple so other species can proliferate. So they're on the phone calling the immune system saying, hey, knock off those guys over there. I'm tired of them bugging me. And they say, oh, I like these bifidobacteria. These bifidobacteria lay a foundation along the lining of the colon, and they build these little biofilms, and they work and talk directly with our enterocytes at the brush border level. And so they want these to proliferate because they're forming the basis, the foundation of how they're living. So some bacteria want to live in the penthouse, some want to live in the basement. And when they all live together well like that, everything works well. Now these bacteria control enzyme expression. Let's say, for example, the bacteria control the handling of milk as an infant. As the body converts post-weaning to food, those bacteria die off, they go away. They mutate and they bring out enzymes to handle more of the food. So again, these bacteria are adaptable to food. And they have very exotic energy extraction methods, let's say from carbohydrates, and that certain species, the Firmicutes, or you might call them the firmicutes, those type of bacteria are super efficient manufacturers of simple carbohydrates. So they're going to drive sugar not only into the body, but directly through the cell membranes into the mitochondria membrane to make ATP energy. They drive energy quickly via sugar. And then there's another species called the bacteroidetes. That doesn't mean they're female, it's just that's the name of the species. They're bacteroidetes, and they're much less efficient. Now, if you have too many of the super efficient and not enough of the less efficient, you're pushing insulin resistance, right? And this is one of the seedings of diabetes, and it's in the GI tract. It's not so much in, oh, you shouldn't have eaten the dessert, which fed those guys, but it's not so much in the virus is attacking your pancreas, and that, as there's a huge factor with diabetes, and it does not get corrected very easily if the GI tract has an improper balance between the two species, or we have too many of the super efficient sugar processors, and they outnumber the average. So we get out of balance. That's one of the things our programs have to deal with, and that's why there's a pathogen purge, in a sense, or an overproliferation of species purge that's involved in the GI pathogen purge program that's part of the GI wellness program. Now, these sugars, by the way, they're for immediate use. This is survival of the human being. the bacteria say, you know what might happen to you? That saber-toothed tiger might just jump out of the cave and give you quite a fright, and you're going to need, bam, instant energy. And so you've got glycogen and you've got this instant fuel, and it's all being lined up for your body to use from these bacteria. These bacteria also sense changes in the environment, whether it be food, weather, toxicity in the air. They can sense these changes in the ambient environment of the human being, and they will alter cellular functions within your body via transcriptional proteins. So these bacteria think it's a hostile world. This is a problem. They help us survive. So good bacteria look out for our life, and we need them in order to survive. They directly modulate gut function, nutritional absorption, mucosal barrier fortification, production of angiogenic factors. So that's the ability to create new blood vessels and feed tissues. Well, angiogenic factors has a bearing, does it not, in cancers and abnormal growths in the body? Again, it goes back to as below, so above, you might say, in the human body, and then as above, so below. We've got to be working together. They established the GALT, G-A-L-T, gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And that is how the 75% of the human immune system is around the intestines. And so if that's defective, a human being has a defective immune system. Let me be real clear. 75% of the immune system is in the GI tract. If it's defective, we're defective. Who's got a good immune system? Raise your hand. You know, eating the drugs, the toxins, the sad, very sad, standard American diet. And so we're messing with our bacteria. They can't help but mess with us because they're as dedicated to their survival as we are to ours. But to them, their survival is number one. Now, these inflammatory processes between the two species, human beings and bacteria, they have to coexist. And a lot of this relationship is controlled by the bacteria, and some of it's controlled by the human being. It's, again, it works together to set an equilibrium. When that equilibrium isn't set, a person has allergies, a person goes autoimmune, a person has issues, diseases. Why? Why does that child, why does a person suddenly get a chronic degenerative disease? Because now their immune systems aren't working. Now, these bacteria are absolutely essential for the immune system. A mature and well-functioning immune system. And they will produce the interleukins and interferons that basically make that set point. The Th1, Th2 immune systems, the humoral and the cellular immune systems, are that relationship, that balance, has a control factor in the GI tract. And so now we can look at the subject of allergies. That the gut bacteria are so important in allergies. If anyone has an allergy system that doesn't address gut bacteria, they really are not masters of their craft. And if that hits too close to home, my apologies, it was not my intention. But if you're not looking at gut bacteria and you do work with allergies or giving people allergy drops or doctors are giving allergy shots, if they're not dealing with the microbiome, they are not anywhere near where healing research is staring us in the face saying, you've got to look at this scenario of increases in vaccinations, increases in antibiotic uses, increases in disinfectant soaps, skews the gut bacteria. And it skews that immune system toward the Th2, the humoral cell response, overproduction of Th2 cytokines. You often see this via the IgE antibodies, and the innate immune system then is out of whack. There will either be skin growths and proliferations and allergies, swellings, bronchiectasis and things like this that will develop because the immune system is off and it's starting to hurt us. The immune system is willing to handle collateral damage. And if we get the balance off, we will have a variety of collateral damage. One thing is we look at in working in thyroid programs, when there's autoimmune, huge amount of our patients, right? Autoimmune, particularly Hashimoto's thyroiditis or hypothyroidism, they will often have Th2 off. Some will have the Th1 immune systems. Point being, the immune system is not balanced. We've got to get back to the microbiome to get correction. That's why when we teach about the thyroid, we often teach start at the microbiome, then do the thyroid. It's because they're all facets of the same thing. These bacteria protect the intestinal stem cells that replenish the epithelial villi. In other words, our nutrition is totally dependent on these stem cells and fresh epithelial villi that can absorb critical nutrients. Now these Bacteroides, they will stimulate a cell called a Paneth cell protein, and that's a ANG4 if you're into that kind of cellular metabolic thing. And this is one that kills the Listeria pathogen. And so it helps protect the integrity of the intestinal lumen. So these bacteria are saying, I'm going to look out for you. I'm going to protect your stem cells. I'm going to allow you to function in your life under my umbrella of protection. You look out for me, I'm looking out for you. And so these pathogens these probiotics prevent pathogens from colonizing in the GI tract. As we make our good bacteria almost become pathogens themselves, we're getting the fox to guard the hen house. And so as we degenerate our microbiome by the use of antibiotics in commercial meat, the mercury from dental fillings, the toxic air, the toxic water, the fast foods, the trans fats, all of these things that have been the bane of modernized society, that as we mutate these bacteria, they quit preventing the pathogens. In fact, they kind of start hanging out in pool halls and getting into trouble themselves. And so some of these good guys literally mutate and turn on us. And so this is the importance of maintaining it. So there's a marriage vow, the promise of all good things that come for caring for the microbiome. Maybe we ought to spend just a little bit of moment. And by the way, every point that I made is backed up by very clear, prominent, duplicatable research studies. Nothing has been conjecture. There's research studies backing up all those activities, and that's why we're having this talk. I'm not citing all the studies. I will put them in a written publication so you can do your homework if you like and check the references. So now let's look at what abuse will do to the bacteria. That may take what they used to call commensal, which is really a symbiotic bacteria, and that starts to convert them to being a pathogen. One of the things about these bacteria is gene sharing. Now, bacteria share genes, and pathogens can acquire antibiotic resistance, right? The superbugs. And they also can increase in their virulence automatically, that if they're being threatened, they're just going to raise the ante. And so the switchblade turns into a gun, and a gun turns into a bomb, and a bomb turns into bioterrorism. And hey, this is a biological life form. We're actually having bioterrorism going on within our bodies, the macrocosm and the microcosm. Okay, they will increase their adaptability to nutrient utilization. So if they really, they like to eat ice cream and you stop feeding them the ice cream, hey, they'll learn how to handle a Brussels sprout. They are able to adapt. And so they can also increase their ability, their cell membranes and so forth, to evade host defenses. So either they will suppress our immune system, immunosuppressive, yes, and they will, or strengthen their offensive weapons. Both sides these bacteria will do in order to evade the human immune system. Can you imagine if one of these nasty bacteria who were our friends gets loose in our body because of leaky gut. I mean, we are talking an internal sepsis, abscessing, and life-threatening diseases. You've heard of people maybe that get wounded in the stomach and they have leakage of their bacteria into the abdominal cavity. And it is massively life-threatening to have that happen. That's why a perforated appendix or a perforated bowel, when they do all those unnecessary scopings of the colon, is so very, very dangerous. These bacteria will alter and improve their ability to attach to the host tissues. Now, this is a problem if one of these guys gets loose in the body. It can attach to a brain cell or to a heart cell so firmly and start an inflammatory process that can lead to death. And so they have all of these tricks up their sleeve if they become offensive to the body. And the other thing is they can establish niches around heavy metals and areas of toxicity. And this is, again, why it's so important to have our patients detoxify from time to time. Clinics often will do a 6-month or a 9-month callback. Do you remember the detox program we did? Right, you loved it, yes. It's time to do it again because we need to constantly stay ahead of the detox issue, of the toxicity issue that's coming in through food, the environment, breathing the air, and so forth. We just have to do that. So Bacteroides, what we were talking about, one of these wonderful probiotic anaerobic species, they will destroy our brush border enzyme systems if they mutate in that direction. And this is where you get serious inability to assimilate food, malnutrition. And the malnutrition is at those little fingery brush borders on the villi that are to be loading millions and millions of food molecules a second into the body. And these Bacteroides, once that they mutate and become more virulent, they can start destroying the intestines. What do you think that means? That means intestinal inflammation. Now you have a basic issue about irritable bowel syndrome and those type of things, some of the ulcerations. It's a probiotic and a microbiome evolution or de-evolution toward pathogens that do it, and or the allowance of pathogenic species. Now these bacteria will secrete an endotoxin. It's called BFT, and it destroys tight junctions too. So here you've got the bonds between the cells that keep all the bad stuff in the colon, in the small intestine, out of the bloodstream, and now they actually have an endotoxin. If they move toward the pathogenics, they will destroy the tight junctions and cause leaky gut. And that will also at the same time weaken the blood-brain barrier. It is so important. Anytime you must teach your patients, because the medical profession has been horribly remiss in recommending probiotics when they give antibiotics. And we know in natural health, sometimes there's a time that patient needs to take an antibiotic. If they don't, they're going to die. So I mean, there's a time and a place for everything. But when they take those antibiotics, they've got to be taking a probiotic, and they've got to continue the probiotics after the antibiotic. That is the only morally ethical and responsible position to even discuss antibiotics, in my humble opinion. And so that's not being done in medicine, and it's up to the natural health practitioner to get that message proclaimed to all of your patients, so whenever they step outside the natural health model and go for an antibiotic, that they can really honor their body, allow the antibiotic to do its God-given ability, and protect the body and replenish the microbiome so the patient can get well and then proceed to be well and immunologically strong so that they'll never have that happen again. The antibiotics also can cause these Bacteroides to secrete endotoxins, and one of them is called LPS. and it assists the bacteria to bond to tissues. Well, that sounds good because we want probiotics to bond in the colon, but we don't want to let one of these bacteria come in through a leaky gut and then take up residence in a hip, or take up residence on an artificial knee or a hip replacement, where they will then fester and go into a sepsis. These bacteroides we talked about, it's interesting to look at how nature adapts. They are not a significant part of the vaginal microbiome, but they increase and they are a part of the vaginal microbiome during labor of childbirth. Now, this is just observing nature's plan to seed that infant with the beneficial strains. And how incredible is that? It's a sweat, it's a hormone change, and the woman creates the environment for this species that is so needed. Why? Because it's anaerobic. And so the infant can get it and get their body seeded during the birth process. If this were to proliferate at other times, which it shouldn't, it would cause cyst, and it's tied in with Bartholin's cyst and pelvic inflammatory disease. So see, there's the ebb and flow, and the good species come back as the terrain changes. If we just look at the infections from these good species gone bad, outside the treaty with the body, there can be deep poisonous things, similar to animal bites that will fester in a body. You can think of abscesses, heart infections, the endocarditis, the myocarditis, the pericarditis, these types of illnesses that are named according to the heart lining or the inner layer of the heart, and this type of thing. They have a high mortality rate, and they result in damage to the heart valves. This is what these good guys can do. Now understand this. Chemotherapy damages the GI tract. It doesn't matter if they're putting the chemo in a stent, or if they're putting it in a vein, or where it is. Inevitably, chemotherapy damages the GI tract. Again, now we're back to the only moral and ethical thing to do during a chemotherapy treatment is that patient should be on constant probiotic supplementation. Chemotherapy also damages the immune system. It damages the immune system of the bacteria, so people going through chemo have a lot of collateral damage. And then you might end up with ingress of these bacteroides into the bloodstream, and that they'll migrate to a weak tissue and cause a septicemia, and it becomes life-threatening, and it also will result in necrotic tissue. So these bacteroides, the good guys, the guys that we really need to take care of, they can result in septic arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis via leaky gut, meningitis, just depending on where they go. And further down the GI tract, irritable bowel, Crohn's, colitis is all associated with these bacteroides overproliferation, and in fact any inflammatory disease. So the decision for us to employ a microbiome wellness, a GI wellness program, is literally, for most people, a seminal event that sets the stage for their future good health. So now let's go over the decisions, because let's pretend here, be the doctor, and I don't know if you're sitting on a chair or behind your desk, or if you're standing over an adjusting table, or what you're doing, but now you're engaged with your patient. Just engage in your mind with your patient. Let's go through your decisions. Number one, in initiating this two-part program, the gastrointestinal pathogen purge, and then the GI wellness, which has two major components. One being preparing and nurturing the terrain, and the other part is reseeding the cultures, which needs to be done with the multiple colonies and substantial numeric advantageous organisms. We've got to get the count up in order so they can really start to dominate, chase out the bad guys, and take over niches. So The GI tract is sort of what used to be called the land of Canaan, and these wandering species, they need to get in there and claim that promised land for themselves and to reclaim it. Now, one of your first decisions you have as a practitioner is, do you want to do a pathogen purge or not? Now, I would say if you don't have bacterial overgrowth or less than a 90 to 10% ratio between good guys and bad guys in the GI tract, raise your hand. We're going to look like Diogenes. We're going to look long and far before we find someone who's got optimal GI tract. I know a few people, but I frequent those circles. Chances are your patients don't. Now, everybody needs the GI tract pathogen purge. But you can decide, does this patient have SIBO, S-I-B-O, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? So the problem here is that some good guys, they may be beneficial probiotics, but they're overgrown in the small intestine. So what are they doing there? They're fermenting sugar. And so the person eats a piece of fruit or something and they blow it up. You know, they eat a pizza and they blow it up. They're always complaining about being bloated. And then even worse, they take fiber. You say, oh, you got to take this fiber. We're going to help you. And they take fiber. What do? They bloat up. They get gas. They get constipation. They get diarrhea because SIBO dysregulates the large intestine. It's in a seat of power. And a problem in the small intestine is a problem in the large intestine. It's all sympathetic. And so SIBO has been diagnosed in natural health for quite a bit. There's a breath test. I would like to point out to you a handy test in my pocket here. Urine collection kit with a vial. You've seen these before. I am sure a reagent and a vial. And this is going to test hydrogen sulfide in the urine. And it changes color. It goes to a dark gray. The person has the SIBO. And really, today it's not like who has it, it's how much do you have. Leaky gut, it's not who has it, it's how much we have. There's that much damage going on from all these causes from the environment. So, if your patient says, I don't do well on fiber, I don't do well on probiotics, I bloat up, I get gas, I belch, I get gas, they have constipation, diarrhea, cramping, any of the irritable bowel situations, we're looking at some SIBO there. And so you can test for it and know how much you need to focus on the pathogen purge portion. Again, everyone needs it. Everyone should go from part 1 to part 2. But as a doctor, you've got the ability with these 2 packages to pick and choose, work something in the middle, work something before and after. They're in 2 packages so that the doctor is respected to have the autonomy to make the decisions for the patient. What if you wanted to do a double pathogen purge and then go to the GI wellness? See, so we want to be sure that programs that come from systemic are empowering the doctor to be a doctor and to do the best for each individual patient. Now, you've got the neurotoxic lab test, and as you move on into the GI wellness, you're going to prepare the terrain. The Z-gluten formula is going to clean out the gliadins, the glutens, the caseins from milk, out of those microvilli, lower inflammation. The L-gut formula is going to nourish the enterocytes, act as an anti-inflammatory, close tight junctions, turn off leaky gut so that intestinal integrity of function can be restored. And then reseeding. You need numerical superiority. It's not the only criterion. You can do a lot with a little sometimes with the right probiotic cultures. But generally speaking, when you're up against trillions, you need at least a billion or something to have an impact. You're going to use a small army to correct a big army's malfunction. And so with the MBC formula, microbiome colonizer, you've got 100 billion and more of 10 species, enterically coated so it can get down through the stomach acid, and then there's species in those 10 that support the small intestine, the large intestine, and over time and a flooding concept, you can go in, kick out some bad guys, get the good guys in, and start changing the set point of inflammation. On that note, remember the meta-oxy test. We're trying to lower inflammation. We're trying to lower cell membrane damage that we're looking at, that lipid peroxidation caused in the body. And so some people are just giving the antioxidants. That can work for some. And for other people, it's not so much an antioxidant issue, it's a redox issue, and they need the MORES. So there's a graduation on meta-oxy. If ROX and EPIC antioxidant formulas don't get that number 7 to come down pretty quickly to a 3 or 4, MORES might be needed. And we're working things at the wrong end. And I'll tell you the underlying way to correct meta-oxy scores, microbiome package, because that's where the set point is. You lower the set point in the intestines, and now the set point in the body lowers, and there's less inflammatory damage at the cells, there's less lipid peroxidation, there's less malandialdehyde in the urine, and that lab test shows you you're winning this at the cellular level. I'd like to bring in a fifth. First, you're looking at SIBO. You're going to choose pathogen purge. You're also choosing as a doctor to give the neurotoxic lab test. You're going to choose when is the right time to prepare the terrain. You're going to choose when and how much to give the reseeding. It's a set package. People can follow it by the numbers. It's also been designed by Systemic that the doctor can interject, if they so choose, enhancements into the program. Very flexible. The fifth one, we've not really talked about this that much, so listen up. It's called reinforce. We have to understand, if we're colonizing, that it needs reinforcements. The colony that went to Jamestown, Virginia, it needed to be reinforced. The colony to a desert island that's going to set up a new society, it needs reinforcements, both in food but in new people. There's going to be people that die, people that get injured, people that are non-functioning in that society. And the hardest part is setting it up. And so if we just do a quick 15-day bottle of probiotics, it needs to be reinforced. It's a law of life. So again, now this is not in the program, but the doctor needs to have more product on the shelf. You're going to need more L-gut, the leaky gut formula, and you're going to need more of the MBC. Keep it in the refrigerator and even in the freezer. And so you're going to come in after the program and maybe give one of the MBC a day, or many clinicians now are using the ABC, a couple of capsules a day for 15 days to what's called reinforce, to keep supporting the good guys, to be able to occupy as many niches. The FBR fiber is bringing in the Bacillus coagulans, 11th culture in this program. Feisty, adaptable, kicks bad guys out. And so the coagulans is great. And then the fiber is giving the soluble and insoluble plant-based fibers that these bacteria thrive on. So the fiber is called a prebiotic. It's a food so that these guys proliferate. Because if you were colonizing that desert island, if you run out of food, you're going to run out of colony. And so you've got to have the reinforcements coming of the prebiotic, the fiber. Besides, most people do so well on the fiber that it starts to return their diet to what nature would have done anyway. And that extra fiber controls glucose uptake. It controls toxicity. It can absorb toxins and carry them out of the body. The fiber is underrepresented in the sad American diet. And so I prefer to have patients stay on fiber for the rest of their lives. And that's why I take it too, because even though my diet is pretty darn good, it's still not back to a perfect raw paleo kind of diet where I know my genetics came from, and all I do is top it off a little bit and pick up some extra goodies that way. So the pathogen purge is 15 days. It's going to use botanicals and enzymes to encourage the removal of pathogens and even good guy overgrowth. We're going after virus, bacteria, fungus, candida, the overproliferative species, antibiotic-altered species that should really not be around anymore, and that may be inflammatory. We're going to be addressing the SIBO, too many of the fermenting bacteria, too high up in the GI tract, so people are bloated after eating and that type of thing. And we're going to look at the neurotoxic metabolite test to prove to patients they need it. And that's where the NZ, to scrub with enzymes, it's antifungal. The number 3 Bactrex, antibacterialgenic. The number 4 FungDX is primarily thought of as an antifungal, but it's also a powerful antiviral. And you'll see some key ingredients, 2 key ingredients in that formula that are directly antiviral. And so now we're dealing with the Candida, we're dealing with viral species, and then the bind. We'll pick up the mycotoxins from molds, chemicals, heavy metals will bind in the bind, and we start cleaning out the terrain, even with the pathogen purge, because bind can actually destroy pathogenic species. Now, as we move to the GI wellness program, 15 days or whatever for the first phase, we're going to prepare the terrain. We're going to make sure there's healthy cells, a healthy brush border, healthy microvilli, healthy tight junctions, and that's what these formulas are made to do. It's going to digest the glutens and the caseins that cause inflammation. It's also going to have inflammation-reducing botanicals, and this can be a 15-day or 30-day or 300-day program, however the doctor sees fit. So again, let's just look at some of the formulas. FBR fiber, soluble, insoluble, it's a prebiotic. The Bacillus coagulans goes in because it's just a feisty guy that will take umbrage with some of the bad guys, and it's a beneficial probiotic. It's going to lower inflammation. It's going to stabilize glucose metabolism, all that in the fiber. The Z-gluten, it's going to clean out the glutens and caseins that are causing inflammation. The L-gut, supporting the cells, dropping inflammation, closes tight junctions. One of the finest leaky gut formulas ever to have been created. The MBC, the flooding aspect of tin cultures enterically coated, and then we look at following that with reinforcement. Now, understanding what we've covered, we understand the importance. We understand that every patient needs this program. It really should be a prerequisite before a patient even gets to see the doctor. You need to do a 30-day program, then come see the doctor. That's how important it is. Unfortunately, we may not be able to do that clinically because oftentimes people come in because they're desperate and they need help now. And so maintenance or reinforcing, many clinicians are using the L-gut formula, the leaky gut formula, because those enterocytes need to be nourished and supported maybe a little bit more than 15 days. 15 days does wonders. But again, it's such beautiful nutrition. Maintenance dose might be just 1 MBC a day, might be 2 of the ABC, and coming back after the program and keeping a probiotic in their program. So scientific research has established this powerful, all-compelling link between the human being and bacteria. And this is not known to the public. Our patients don't know this. And it gives us as doctors the true word to teach and to educate our patients in the importance of maintaining their microbiome, perhaps of incorporating the bone broth that can support the Bacteroides, and the bone broth that can, by staying in a fast on the bone broth, the carbohydrate species are thinned down, and that also impacts SIBO. And then bringing in the fermented vegetables such as cabbage and beets and even carrots and so forth that have fermented species, and that these are constantly going. We need to understand nature intended the human being to be eating fermented vegetables at least every week, if not every day, because it's a way of preserving and prolonging the food. It's a way of making it easier to digest. And lo and behold, we have the statistics. The people in the Balkans who have ferments every day, they were living to be 120, 140 years old. This has a bearing on health and longevity, the fermented vegetables. So now we have educated doctors to embrace these things and to get their patients using these. Even a tablespoon of raw organic fermented cabbage, sauerkraut, every day, a tablespoon provides trillions of lactobacilli, transient species that throw bad guys out, that keep good guys proliferating, that leave a lactic acid that more adhering species need. They take that lactic acid and turn it into their metabolic energy. So we need these cultures coming down the hatch. It sets the synergistic alliance for human health. Treat the bacteria properly and they will repay us and they will repay your patients with the very foundation of health. This is, we ought to have a debate. What is the most important thing you can do? The most important thing you can do to rebuild and maintain health. There's going to be a strong case made for the GI Wellness Program. Certainly we could have someone argue spirituality, we could have someone argue emotional stability, we could have someone in a toxicity case argue detox or something, but definitely in the final few of anyone who can wage a debate, this is the most important thing you can do for your patients and for yourself to rebuild, to set the stage for healing. No matter what reason they came in for, we've seen the broad gamut of impact these bacteria have. Most important thing we can do is start a case with the microbiome packages, get the GI tract squared away as foundation, ground zero, and upon that build our programs to remove the source, to detox, to support the cellular metabolism, and prepare the thyroid for optimal metabolic processes. And at this point, we are priming the body to heal itself. Thank you very much.